Hello guys, it's 899 here and welcome to today's video where today we're going to go through our NRL tips and predictions for round 25 of the NRL season. This is pretty much the starting of the crucial point when it comes to the season. There are teams vying for finals opportunities and a big spoon battle at the bottom. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. Starting off the round on Thursday night, we have the South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the St George Illawarra Dragons. The South Sydney Rabbitohs coming off a 4-point win over the Parramatta Eels, whilst the Dragons are coming off a 4-point loss to the Warriors. The loss to St George has essentially pretty much put the final hopes in a bit of a coffin, basically needing a whole heap of teams to lose nearly all of their games. I think for the Roosters case, they need to lose all of them and then lose a considerable amount, and then the Dragons need to win all of their matches. So yeah, it's very much unlikely. But a win for the Dragons can see them jump up a couple of positions to possibly even as high as 10th, depending on how big of a win they get. Whilst a win for the Bunnies will see them climb out of the bottom 4 into 13th. It'll be interesting to see how this match does play out, but in my personal opinion, I think the Dragons still want to, finish the season a bit on high. So I'm going to say I think St George are going to win this, but I think this will be quite close and quite interesting to see how this match does play out. Now we go on to Friday, where honestly, it's two blockbusters. We're at 6 PM. We're starting off all the way in Mudgee as the Penrith Panthers take on the Canberra Raiders. The Canberra Raiders are coming off a bye, whilst the Panthers are coming off a winning streak breaking defeat to the Melbourne Storm. Some would say controversy had a factor in that match. Hard to say. A win for the Panthers would see them leapfrog the Warriors back into the top 4, whilst a win for the Raiders will give them a 4-point gap against Melbourne, which could essentially put one hand on the minor premiership trophy. This match for me personally, this is going to be the test to see, are Canberra title contenders? I mean, there obviously are, but I mean like favourites, I should have said. Because I think from results over the last couple of weeks, the top 4's not exactly looking great, where, in my personal opinion, at this point, Penrith and Melbourne are probably the favourites to win, but I think Canberra need a big statement win. But unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be happening here. I think the Panthers will bounce back from their loss last week and get the victory. And then we go into the Friday at 8 PM, where we have the Melbourne Storm taking on the Canterbury Bulldogs. The Storm, mentioned in the previous fixture, got the golden point win over the Penrith Panthers, whilst the Bulldogs had probably one of their worst performances of the season in a 20-point loss to the Roosters. A win for the Storm is obviously to try to wrestle away the minor premiership from Canberra, so it is all dependent on what happens there. And a win for the Bulldogs will actually have them tie on the same points as the Storm to potentially have a home final in the first week. I do think this generally will be a precursor to a match that will happen in the finals later on. So it's pretty important for the Dogs to get this victory, obviously, for a potential home qualifying final against the Storm. I just think the Storm are on too good of a momentum and they're able to win ugly, which for me hasn't been that much of a factor for the Storm, which I know people are going to say, what's the relevance? But it's just my internal thinking. So I'm just going to say, I think the Storm are going to get it done at home. It's just, I think pretty much they're going to set themselves as one of the main contenders for this premiership. And now we go into Saturday, where at 3 PM we have the Manly Sea Eagles taking on the Dolphins in what is essentially one of the most crucial matches to try to qualify for the finals. The Dolphins are coming off a 10-point loss in the Battle of Brisbane, where honestly they kind of capitulated in the second half, whilst the Manly Sea Eagles are coming off a loss to the West Tigers, where in complete genuine honesty, I think it was the worst second half I've ever seen the Sea Eagles play. Like, they were bad. So, as it stands, what will happen here? A win for the Sea Eagles will keep them in 10th, but would have them on equal points with the Dolphins, and essentially, Manly would kind of need the Roosters to lose this week. However, a win for the Dolphins will actually leapfrog them over the Roosters into the top 8, but obviously, the Roosters still have to play. So this is going to be very important. If the Sea Eagles lose, this is, or you can pretty much almost put a nail in the coffin of their finals hopes. So it's very important they get this victory. I just think if the Dolphins can have a bit more of a complete performance and work on what went wrong last week, I think they should be able to get the job done. I think the Dolphins will win. but in a very close one. Now we go into the Saturday at 5:30 where we have the Gold Coast Titans taking on the New Zealand Warriors. The Titans are coming off a 54-22 loss to Cronulla, whilst the Warriors finally snapping their current spell of losing streaks with a 14-10 win over the Dragons. It's pretty safe to say the Titans need to win if they want to avoid the wooden spoon, because it's pretty much now confirmed it's going to be between them and the Knights, with a win putting the Titans above Newcastle, sending the Knights down into the wooden spoon place, obviously depending on what happens on the Sunday against the Broncos. But a win for the Warriors will keep them in the top 4 as they try to keep Penrith at bay. I do understand that the Gold Coast Titans are a bit of a bogey team for the Warriors. I just think with the motivation the Warriors currently have, I think they should just be able to get it done. But it wouldn't surprise me if it is a lot closer than what it's going to be. And now we go into the 7:35 game on the Saturday where we have the Parramatta Eels taking on the Sydney Roosters. Parramatta are coming off a close loss to the South Sydney Rabbitohs, whilst the Roosters are coming off a big 20-point win over the Bulldogs as they now situate themselves in the top 8. A win for the Eels should mathematically keep them away from the spoon race. It would have them jump up to the outside of the bottom 4. That'd be very nice for them. However, a win for the Roosters will keep themselves in the 8, and then depending on what happens with the Dolphins, could have a 4-point gap, which could almost essentially lock up the finals. They can't overtake Cronulla because Cronulla have the bye this round. So with this, I think the Roosters, they're going on a bit of a late season run, which is, really good to see. I mean, Tedesco's had a really good season. Definitely probably up there in terms of candidacy for the Dally M. So I'm going to say I think the Roosters will get the job done there. And now we go into the Sunday games where at 2 p.m. we have the Newcastle Knights taking on the Brisbane Broncos. The Knights are coming off a pretty substantial loss to the Cowboys, which is now 6 losses in a row. And it's basically confirmed the Knights are in a spoon battle, whilst the Broncos are coming off a big win in the Battle of Brisbane, coming back in the second half where they just played actual brilliant football. A win for the Knights could see them jump up as high as 14th potentially if they get a massive win over Brisbane. That's not happening. And a win for the Broncos could see them jump up as high as 4th if Penrith and the Warriors both lose. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say I think the Knights seasons might be a little bit over. Obviously I had the video yesterday talking about my problems with it, but yeah, the Broncos are winning, and if they don't win by 13 plus, I think it's an indictment on their club. And finally, at 4:05 p.m. on the Sunday, to close out the round, we have the West Tigers taking on the North Queensland Cowboys. The West Tigers are coming off a win over the Manly Seagulls to keep their pretty slim finals hopes alive, but they are still there, as the North Queensland Cowboys are coming off a big win over the Newcastle Knights. Now, essentially, the Titans are playing for their finals hopes, so a win here would get them up to 26 points, which would have them around 10th, obviously dependent on several teams losing games. So even still, it's not really in their hands. Whilst a win for the Cowboys could see them leapfrog over the Dragons, depending on their results, and go into 12th place. Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that, even though, yes, technically the Tigers still have finals hopes, it's just not happening. They need a lot to go in their favour. And even if everything does go in their favour, I'm just going to straight up say I think the Cowboys are going to win this game because their high-end talent has to do something at least. And that's the end of the video. Who do you guys have this round? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all later.